The stars had always been a symbol of hope and adventure for humanity. As Earth looked out into the vast unknown, the idea of alien life was something that fascinated people, something that could lead to alliances, knowledge, and endless possibilities. But as Earth's telescopes scanned the dark expanse, no one knew that the next transmission would change everything. In a dark, high-tech room deep within the Galactic Council's headquarters, the galaxy's most advanced alien leaders were gathered. The room, built inside a massive asteroid, was a technological marvel, designed to keep their secrets safe. On a large holographic screen, images of Earth appeared, slowly zooming in until the entire planet was visible. A voice echoed through the room, a voice that commanded respect, a voice that carried centuries of authority. It was the Council's supreme leader, the one who spoke for all the galaxy's civilizations. "We are here today because we face a grave danger," the voice began. "This danger, this threat to the entire galaxy, is human." The council chamber was quiet. The alien representatives, some reptilian, others insectoid, and many more strange and terrifying beings, all exchanged nervous glances. Despite the apparent unity in the room, many of them dismissed humanity as nothing more than an insignificant species on a backwater planet. But the supreme leader's tone carried weight. He had seen something that none of them had, something that terrified him. A hologram flickered on the screen, displaying images of human history, the rise of civilization, the wars, the technological leaps, the destruction, and the constant rise from the ashes. Humanity had survived apocalyptic events, global conflicts, and threats far beyond its understanding. The supreme leader pointed at the image of Earth and said, "The humans are survivors. They don't die easily. They adapt, evolve, and most dangerously, they overcome." The room was still. Alien diplomats who had once laughed at the idea of humans being a threat now looked unsure. The supreme leader continued, "They have survived a global war. They've destroyed their own planet once and rebuilt. The humans are unpredictable. And more than that, they are dangerous. We warned the Zarkians. We told them not to make the mistake of underestimating humanity. But they didn't listen." A buzzing filled the room. The Zarkians, one of the most advanced and feared civilizations in the galaxy, had long been known for their ruthlessness and their vast technology. But they had never been threatened by a species like humans. The Zarkians had once regarded Earth as a worthless planet, a place to conquer with ease. But now, the Galactic Council was telling them otherwise. "We've seen them face impossible odds," the supreme leader said. "Their war machines are primitive, but their tactics are brilliant. They've already taken down fleets that should have crushed them. Their resilience is unparalleled. Do not underestimate them. They will retaliate." At this point, the image shifted to a dark figure, a commander of the Zarkian fleet. This Zarkian was bold and ruthless, known across the galaxy for conquering planets with terrifying speed. His dark, metallic armor gleamed in the holographic light as he stood on the deck of his flagship. He had a scornful look on his face as he watched a transmission from the Galactic Council, dismissing their warnings. "Humans are nothing but ants," he sneered. "If they dare to fight us, we will crush them." The supreme leader's face darkened as he continued. "The Zarkians have never faced an enemy like humanity. They will pay the price for their arrogance. But we cannot afford to stand by and let them destroy us all." The warning was clear. The Council had failed to convince the Zarkians. They had underestimated Earth and its people. As the hologram of the Zarkian commander faded, a new image appeared, a battle-ready fleet of massive Zarkian warships descending upon Earth. Their sleek, terrifying ships were cloaked, invisible to human sensors. Their arrival was silent, the calm before the storm. "They will come. They will attack with full force." The supreme leader's voice was grim. "When they do, we will need humanity's help. And I pray they are not as far gone as the Zarkians believe." With that final statement, the transmission ended. The holographic display flickered and went dark, leaving the alien delegates in an eerie silence. Many of them remained seated, their thoughts heavy. Some still believed the Zarkians could defeat humanity easily, but there was a nagging fear deep within them. They couldn't deny the humans' sheer will to survive, the ability to rise against all odds. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Far below, on Earth, humanity had no idea of the threat looming above. Life continued on the planet as usual, busy, chaotic, and uncertain. People were more concerned with their daily lives than with the stars. However, this was all about to change. As the first Zarkian ships dropped out of hyperspace, humanity was still in the dark. Earth's military systems remained unaware of the incoming assault, relying on outdated satellite technology to scan for threats. It wasn't until a deep space sensor, buried in the heart of the Earth's military base, detected something strange. The systems alerted the defense commanders, but it was too late. In the heart of a military command center, General Melissa Ortega received the first warning. "This can't be right," she muttered as the readings showed enormous ships entering Earth's atmosphere. The warning lights blinked in red. "Prepare for impact," she ordered. But she had no idea how much time she had left. The Zarkians had arrived. The clock was ticking, and the fate of humanity now rested on its ability to face an enemy that had already won. But what the Zarkians didn't know was that humanity, the very species they had underestimated, had something far greater than technology on its side. It had a spirit that couldn't be crushed, a will to fight that was unbreakable. The invasion began, and with it came the first real test of humanity's strength. Would they rise to the challenge, or would they fall before an enemy far superior in technology and might? The Supreme Leader's warning echoed in the back of every human mind. Do not underestimate them. Humans will retaliate. The silence in the command center was deafening. General Melissa Ortega stood at the center of the room, her eyes glued to the massive holographic display that showed Earth's defenses. The red lights flashed across the monitors, signaling that something was wrong. Something huge was coming. She knew the Zarkians were here, but she didn't know what to expect. The reports were coming in fast, but they couldn't prepare her for what was unfolding. The Zarkian fleet was massive, far larger than any enemy they had ever faced. The ships dropped out of hyperspace like shadows, their sleek and deadly forms cloaked in invisibility until the last possible moment. The first human response came in the form of a missile launch, but it was too late. The enemy's technology was far more advanced. A single Zarkian ship disabled the missile launchers with ease, sending them spiraling into the sky in a blaze of fire. "Commander Ortega, what are our options?" asked her second-in-command, Lieutenant James Pearson, his voice filled with urgency. His eyes never left the screen as they watched the incoming threat. General Ortega's mind raced. They had prepared for many things, but not this. Not an invasion by a race of beings who had mastered technology far beyond their own. Earth's military had the best soldiers, the best weapons, but they were nothing compared to the Zarkian war machines. The fleet was already in orbit, blocking out the sun. They had cut off any way to defend themselves. "Deploy all units," Ortega ordered. "We fight them with everything we have." But deep down, she knew they didn't stand a chance. Not at first. The Zarkian ships' cloaking abilities made them nearly impossible to track. Their weapons were far superior to any technology on Earth, and their artificial intelligence could predict and counter every human move. The humans were in the fight of their lives. The first assault came from above. A Zarkian warship unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts, lighting up the sky as Earth's cities shook from the force of the attack. It was a show of power, an undeniable message from the invaders. They weren't here for a conversation. They were here to destroy. In cities all over the world, people looked up in horror as the skies burned with the attack. There was no warning, no time to prepare. It was chaos. Air defenses fired back, but the enemy's shields absorbed the blasts like nothing. Earth's military was scrambling, but there was no chance against such overwhelming force. Every move they made was anticipated. every tactic countered by the Zarkian eye. But amidst the chaos, something else was happening. As the warships fired down upon Earth, the sound of the attacks was deafening. The cities were falling, and the military was losing its grip. Yet there was a fire burning in the hearts of the human soldiers. They had been underestimated, and now they were determined to prove everyone wrong. "Do not give up. We fight for Earth," General Ortega shouted as she watched the devastation unfold. Her voice crackled through the communication channels, reaching the soldiers on the ground. They needed hope. They needed something to hold on to, even if it was just for a moment. On the ground, soldiers and civilians alike gathered in underground bunkers. They were terrified, but there was something stronger inside them, something that made them fight back. Humanity had faced extinction before and survived. It was this resilience that the Zarkians had failed to understand. Elsewhere, Captain Scene Hunter, one of Earth's best pilots, was preparing for battle. His sleek fighter ship stood ready on the launch pad, the cockpit's lights flashing as he climbed inside. He had trained for years, never imagining that his skills would be put to the test in such a way. "Captain, we've got incoming," shouted his wingman, Lieutenant Kiara Adams, through the comms. "I see them," Hunter replied, his voice steady. "We can't let them win. Let's show them what humanity is made of." The fighter jets shot into the sky, soaring through the smoke-filled air toward the Zarkian fleet. The odds were stacked against them, but Earth's pilots had a spirit that couldn't be defeated. Hunter's heart raced as he dove into the heart of the battle. Zarkian ships were everywhere, their deadly weapons firing with terrifying accuracy. But humanity was not backing down. Hunter weaved between enemy fire, launching missiles and firing his laser cannons. The Zarkian ships were powerful, but human pilots had something that technology couldn't replicate: intuition. In the chaos of the battle, Hunter's mind stayed clear. He fired again, watching as one of the enemy ships exploded in a fiery ball. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Target the engines," Hunter shouted to his wingman. "If we take them out, we can slow them down." His missiles locked onto the closest Zarkian warship's engines, and with a precise shot, they disabled the ship. It was a small victory, but it was the spark the humans needed. More fighter jets joined the fray, working in unison to take down as many enemy ships as they could. Despite being outmatched technologically, humans were fighting back with everything they had. On the ground, soldiers were working in teams to launch ground-based missiles at the incoming ships. Some of the rockets found their marks, taking down a few of the smaller Zarkian vessels, but it was a losing battle. The Zarkians had superior firepower, and Earth's defenses were failing. Back in the command center, General Ortega watched helplessly. The battle was slipping out of control. They needed a miracle. But then, a message came through. It was from the Supreme Leader of the Galactic Council, the same alien who had warned about the Zarkians. "We made a mistake," the message began. "We should have listened to your warnings. The Zarkians are beyond reason, and they will destroy us all. But there may be one chance. You must hold out. There is a weapon, a powerful one. It's hidden, but it can turn the tide. We will help you find it." The message ended abruptly, leaving Ortega with one last hope. The humans weren't alone in this fight, and perhaps, just perhaps, they could turn the battle around. As Earth's forces gathered, preparing for the next wave, there was a renewed sense of determination. They had fought with everything they had, and now, with the promise of help and a weapon that could change everything, they were ready for the next phase of the fight. The fate of humanity was still uncertain, but they were not going down without a fight. The Zarkians had made one mistake. They had underestimated humanity. And now, the humans were ready to show them what it meant to be truly unstoppable. The ground shook beneath General Ortega's feet as another blast rocked the base. The Zarkians had escalated their assault, and Earth's forces were beginning to show the strain. The energy shields surrounding major cities were failing, and it felt like the world was on the brink of collapse. Ortega clenched her fists, her heart pounding in her chest. Every second counted now. "We can't hold them off much longer, General," Lieutenant Pearson said, his face pale as he stared at the holographic map. The red blips signified enemy ships, advancing in perfect formation. Their forces were relentless, overwhelming every defense Earth had. "Our ships are being wiped out one by one, and the ground forces are retreating." The walls of the command center flickered with light from the explosions that continued to rattle the building. Ortega's mind was racing. The Zarkian fleet was too powerful, too well coordinated. Earth's defenses were crumbling faster than she could process. It felt like a matter of time before they were wiped off the face of the planet. But then, something unexpected happened. A small, flickering message appeared on her screen. "General Ortega, we have received the signal," said Commander Thomas in a rushed voice. His eyes were wide with disbelief. "It's from the Galactic Council. They'd located the weapon." The message was brief, but packed with life-changing information. There was a weapon, hidden deep within Earth's vast and uncharted wilderness, capable of turning the tide of the war. The Galactic Council had traced it using ancient intelligence, and they were ready to help Earth's forces retrieve it. A weapon of unimaginable power was humanity's last chance, and it lay somewhere in the heart of the planet. "Commander, we need a team. We need to find it. Now," Ortega ordered, her voice filled with urgency. The words were coming out of her mouth, but her mind was already working ahead. The Zarkians were moments away from total domination. Time was slipping through their fingers. The weapon could be their only hope. Within hours, a team of Earth's best soldiers was assembled. The mission was clear: retrieve the weapon hidden in the uncharted wilderness and bring it back to the command center. Ortega knew that the chances of success were slim, but they had no other option. Captain Sean Hunter was among those chosen to go. He had led numerous missions, but this one felt different. It wasn't just about fighting an enemy now. It was about saving humanity itself. He looked around at his team, all hardened soldiers with eyes full of determination. They knew the odds, but they weren't going to back down. Not now. "We move fast and quiet," Hunter instructed, his voice steady. "We don't have time to waste. Stay alert." The team boarded their transport vehicles, and the journey to the wilderness began. Outside, the battle raged on. Explosions lit up the night sky as missiles collided with the Zarkian fleet above. The air was thick with smoke, and the sounds of war filled the air. But in this small transport, all was quiet. The soldiers sat in tense silence, knowing the mission ahead would decide everything. After hours of travel, they finally reached the coordinates provided by the Galactic Council. They were deep in a dense forest, surrounded by towering trees and thick underbrush. It was dark, the only light coming from the small lights on their helmets and the occasional flash of distant explosions. The air felt heavy, as if the very earth was holding its breath. Hunter and his team stepped out of the transport, weapons at the ready. The weight of the mission was on their shoulders. They weren't just soldiers now. They were humanity's last hope. If they failed, Earth would fall. The journey was grueling. They trekked through thick forests, waded through fast-moving rivers, and climbed jagged mountains. Each step brought them closer to the unknown. And with every mile, the tension in the air grew. The soldiers had trained for this, but nothing could have prepared them for the stakes of the mission. They were walking into the unknown, with nothing but their instincts, and the hope that the weapon they sought would truly exist. After what felt like days of exhausting travel, they reached the site, an ancient, crumbling structure deep in the heart of the wilderness. The weapon was hidden inside, protected by long-forgotten technology. It was a relic from an ancient civilization, long before the Zarkians had ever come to power. It had been buried, waiting for the right moment to be found. Hunter's team moved cautiously, scanning the surroundings. There was an eerie silence, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. The soldiers entered the structure, their boots echoing through the dark, stone corridors. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in strange symbols. "Stay sharp," Hunter whispered as they moved deeper inside. The atmosphere was tense, the silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps. They were getting closer to the weapon, but there was a feeling of dread that crept into their hearts. What if the weapon wasn't real? What if it was a trap? But they couldn't afford to stop now. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. They continued forward until they finally reached a chamber at the heart of the structure. There, standing in the center of the room, was the weapon. An enormous, glowing sphere, suspended in midair by a network of intricate glowing cables. The sphere radiated a soft, pulsating light, its energy field humming with power. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "This is it," Hunter said, his voice barely a whisper. "The weapon." As the team approached, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The air grew thick with an electric charge, and the glowing sphere pulsed faster, as if reacting to their presence. It was as if the weapon knew they were there, and it was waiting for them. Hunter knew they had no time to waste. "We need to take it now." The team quickly set to work, using specialized equipment to lift the sphere and prepare it for transport. But even as they worked, a sense of unease gnawed at Hunter. The Zarkians wouldn't let them have this weapon without a fight. They knew humanity's only hope rested on it, and they would do everything in their power to stop them from taking it. As the soldiers loaded the weapon into their transport, the sound of Zarkian ships overhead grew louder. The battle wasn't over yet, and Earth's forces were still losing the fight. But for the first time in days, General Ortega and her team had a glimmer of hope. They had something powerful on their side now. And if they could get it back in time, they might just be able to turn the tide of the war. The final battle for humanity had just begun, and with this weapon in their hands, they were ready to fight back. The tension was palpable as Captain Hunter and his team hurried back toward their transport with the weapon. The forest around them seemed quieter now, but the calm felt unnerving. Their mission had been successful so far, but they knew the hardest part was still ahead. The Zarkians were everywhere, and they wouldn't let humanity walk away with a weapon that could turn the tide of the war. They were coming, and they were coming fast. Hunter moved quickly, his eyes scanning the trees around them. He could feel the weight of the weapon on his shoulders. It wasn't just an object. It was the last hope for humanity's survival. But with every passing second, the sense of impending danger grew. The Zarkians knew they were here, and they were not going to let the weapon leave without a fight. As they reached the transport, Hunter's radio crackled to life. "Hunter, this is Ortega." The general's voice came through, steady but tinged with urgency. "The Zarkians have launched a full assault on Earth's last line of defense. We're outnumbered and outgunned. You need to get back here with that weapon, now. We don't have much time." Hunter's heart raced. The battlefield back home was lost, and Ortega was asking them to turn the tide with just this one weapon. The pressure was immense, but there was no turning back. He nodded at his team. "We'll make it," he said, his voice firm. "We have no other choice." The soldiers quickly boarded the transport, their faces grim. They could feel the gravity of their mission weighing on them, but they couldn't afford to waste a single second. As the engines roared to life, the ship lifted off from the forest clearing, and they set course for Earth. The journey back to Earth was tense, filled with the sound of the wind howling against the transport's hull. The weapon, still glowing faintly in the cargo hold, hummed with energy, its pulse matching the rapid beat of Hunter's heart. The skies above Earth were ablaze with the fire of battle. The Zarkian fleet was massive, a storm of destruction hanging over their planet. And down on the ground, Earth's soldiers were giving their last stand. Hunter's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden alarm blaring from the ship's control panel. His eyes went wide. "Incoming," he shouted, barely a second before the ship jolted violently, throwing everyone off balance. They had been hit. The Zarkian ships had found them. Hunter gritted his teeth as the transport shook under the weight of the enemy's weapons fire. "Brace for impact," he yelled. The ship's defensive shields flared to life, absorbing the brunt of the blasts. But they were weakening. They wouldn't hold for long. Evasive maneuvers. Hunter ordered. The pilot yanked the controls, and the transport veered sharply to the left, narrowly dodging another barrage of missiles. The ship dipped low over the treetops, skimming the surface of the planet, as explosions rocked the ground below. "Captain, we can't outrun them. We need to fight back," Lieutenant Pearson shouted, his voice filled with panic. Hunter's gaze snapped to the weapons systems control. It was a long shot, but they had to try. "Prepare the main cannon. We're going to give them a taste of what we've got." The transport's cannons powered up, a low hum filling the cabin as the targeting system locked onto the nearest Zarkian ship. With a single command, Hunter unleashed a powerful shot that lit up the sky. The blast hit one of the Zarkian warships, sending it spiraling into the atmosphere, its shields flickering out. The ship exploded in a fiery ball of flames. The victory was brief. Another Zarkian ship emerged from the clouds above, firing relentlessly at their transport. The shields flared again, but this time they didn't hold. A massive explosion rocked the side of the ship, sending the entire craft tumbling. "We're going down." The pilot screamed as the control systems flickered and failed. The ship nosedived toward the ground, and all Hunter could do was grab onto whatever he could as the world turned upside down. Seconds later, the transport crashed hard into the jungle, sending a shockwave through the forest. Trees splintered and scattered as the ship slid across the ground, grinding to a halt. The crew was thrown from their seats, but miraculously, most of them were still alive, battered but conscious. Hunter shook his head, trying to clear the ringing in his ears. He unbuckled his harness and looked over at his team. "Everyone all right?" "Barely," Pearson muttered, wiping blood from his forehead. "But we've got bigger problems. The Zarkians are closing in. They know we're down." Hunter nodded grimly. The crash had done more than just destroy their ship. It had made them vulnerable. The Zarkians would be on them in minutes, and without their transport, they were stranded in the middle of enemy territory, with the weapons still in their hands. "We move fast. We get to the secondary base and make contact with Ortega. We can't let them take this weapon." Hunter turned to the rest of the team. "Move out." The soldiers gathered their gear and quickly formed up, weapons at the ready. The jungle was eerily quiet, but the sound of Zarkian forces closing in on their position was unmistakable. Through the dense trees, Hunter could hear the faint hum of enemy dropships approaching, their engines cutting through the air like a predator's growl. "We need to stay ahead of them," Hunter said, scanning the forest. The trees here were tall and dense, offering some cover, but it wouldn't last long. The team set off at a sprint, moving swiftly through the thick underbrush. They knew the Zarkians wouldn't be far behind. Each step they took felt heavier, as if the weight of their mission was becoming too much to bear. But there was no time to second-guess. They had to keep moving. As they ran, explosions echoed through the jungle. The ground shook again, and Hunter knew they had made contact. The Zarkians were closing in, and they weren't just going to give up easily. This was it, the final counterattack. If they didn't make it to the secondary base, if they didn't get the weapon back to the front lines, humanity's last hope would be lost. The soldiers pushed on, adrenaline fueling their every move. They fought through exhaustion, through fear, through pain. They knew what was at stake. And then, just as the Zarkian forces were closing in on their position, the distant sound of Earth's warships could be heard in the sky. A glimmer of hope. The cavalry had arrived. Earth wasn't giving up just yet. But the battle was far from over. The counterattack had begun, and the war for Earth's survival was about to reach its most critical moment yet. The fight had only just started, and the soldiers of Earth were ready to face whatever the Zarkians threw at them. Because this was their world, and they were going to fight for it. The jungle felt colder as the soldiers continued to push through the dense trees, their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. The sound of Zarkian dropships was growing louder, echoing across the treetops, and Hunter knew they didn't have much time left. They were close to their destination, the secondary base, but the enemy was closing in fast. His heart raced, each beat filled with the weight of the mission that was now more dangerous than ever. They had just crossed a small clearing when Hunter noticed something that made his blood run cold. There were no more sounds of pursuit. The distant hum of the Zarkian ships had suddenly stopped. It was eerily quiet, and that was never a good sign. "Captain, something's wrong," Lieutenant Pearson said, his voice tense. He paused and looked around, his eyes scanning the horizon. "It's too quiet. The Zarkians don't stop like this." Hunter didn't answer immediately. His instincts were screaming at him to act, but he didn't know where to go next. They couldn't stop now, not when they were so close to the secondary base. They had to keep moving. He glanced over his shoulder at the rest of the team. "Stay sharp. We keep moving. If they're waiting for us, we'll give them a fight they won't forget." But as they began to move again, something changed. The sound of footsteps, human footsteps, suddenly echoed from behind them. Hunter spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. He wasn't expecting to see who he saw. It was Sergeant Monroe, one of the more experienced soldiers in their unit, but something about his expression made Hunter freeze. Monroe's eyes weren't filled with the determination that Hunter had come to expect from him. Instead, there was an unmistakable look of guilt, of fear. Hunter felt a chill run through him. Monroe had been part of their team from the beginning, but now, as he stepped into the clearing, it was clear that something was off. Monroe wasn't alone. Several other soldiers had followed him, their faces equally blank, emotionless. "Monroe," Hunter said slowly, his voice filled with suspicion. "What's going on?" Monroe hesitated, his eyes flickering nervously to the others behind him. I didn't want to, Captain, but..." His voice trailed off, and he looked down, avoiding Hunter's gaze. "The Zarkians. They offered us a deal. A way out. I didn't think it would come to this." Hunter's heart sank. He felt the blood drain from his face as he realized what Monroe was saying. "You betrayed us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like a punch to his gut. The other soldiers behind Monroe stepped forward, their weapons drawn. "We're not your enemies, Captain," one of them said. "We're just trying to survive." Hunter shook his head in disbelief. "You're working with the enemy, after everything we've been through." Monroe's face twisted with regret. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The Zarkians promised us safety. They said if we helped them capture the weapon, they'd spare us. And we believed them. But now, it's too late to turn back. Hunter's mind was racing, the shock of betrayal still settling in. He knew these men. They had fought beside him, bled with him. And now, they were standing there, betraying everything they had stood for. It was unthinkable. "Why?" Pearson asked, his voice trembling with anger. "Why would you do this to your own people?" "I didn't know who else to turn to," Monroe muttered. "You don't understand. Earth is falling. We're losing. There's no hope left." Hunter's fists clenched at his sides. He could feel the rage bubbling up inside him, but he knew he had to stay calm. If they fought now, they would all die. But how could he let this betrayal slide? "You don't get to decide that," Hunter said coldly. "You don't get to betray us just because things got hard. We were never alone in this fight. There's always hope, no matter what." Monroe looked away, his face filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, Captain. I didn't want it to end this way." But before Hunter could respond, a Zarkian ship appeared above them, cutting through the sky like a blade. It was a massive warship, and it hovered ominously above the treetops. The other soldiers turned to look up at the ship, their expressions betraying a mix of fear and relief. "Perfect," Monroe muttered under his breath. "The Zarkians are here to collect." Hunter didn't have time to process the shock of the betrayal. There was no more room for hesitation. The Zarkians had arrived. Without warning, the Zarkian ship unleashed a torrent of fire upon the jungle. Explosions rocked the ground as the trees were torn apart in a violent storm of fire. Hunter and his team dove to the ground, trying to shield themselves from the incoming barrage. The air was thick with smoke, and the sounds of destruction filled their ears. Through the haze of fire and dust, Hunter saw Monroe's face, and for the first time, he saw something other than guilt in his eyes. Fear. He looked like a man who realized he had made a terrible mistake. The explosions stopped as suddenly as they had begun, and the jungle fell into an eerie silence. For a moment, Hunter thought they had made it, that somehow they had survived. But as he stood up, his heart sank. In the chaos, he had lost track of his team. He called out for them, his voice shaking with fear, but the only response was the crackling of the fire. One by one, the faces of his soldiers emerged from the smoke, but there was one face missing: Bonner, the young soldier who had been with them since the beginning, the one who had always been there to back them up, was nowhere to be found. "Bonner," Hunter shouted, but there was no reply. Pearson stepped forward, his face grim. "He's gone, Captain." Hunter's chest tightened. Bonner was gone. The team had lost someone they could never replace. It wasn't just a loss for the mission. It was a personal blow. Bonner had been like a brother to him. Monroe stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper. I never meant for this to happen. I didn't want anyone to die." Hunter's eyes burned with anger and sadness. He looked at the soldiers who had betrayed them, his mind torn between the hatred he felt for their actions and the pain of losing one of his own. "We're not done yet," Hunter said, his voice cold. "The war isn't over. We'll finish what we started, with or without you." But deep down, he knew this betrayal would haunt him forever. The loss of Bonner, the trust broken by his own men. It was more than just a blow to the mission. It was a blow to everything they had fought for, and Hunter wasn't sure if they could ever recover from it. But there was no time to dwell on the past. The battle was still raging, and Earth's survival depended on what came next. The war was far from over. The night sky above Earth was alive with fire. The once peaceful heavens were now filled with the chaotic flashing of laser beams and the streaks of missile trails. The Zarkian fleet was massive, an unrelenting force that had already destroyed countless cities and pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. But what the invaders didn't know was that Earth was far more dangerous than they had anticipated. And now, humanity's final stand was about to begin. Hunter stood in the command center, watching the massive screens as they displayed the enemy ships entering Earth's atmosphere. His heart pounded in his chest. The sense of urgency was overwhelming. But he knew there was no turning back. The Earth's final assault had already begun. There was no room for mistakes. Beside him stood Lieutenant Pearson, his face grim, but his eyes burning with determination. "We've trained for this moment our entire lives," Pearson said, his voice steady despite the tension. "This is the last chance we've got. If we fail now, it's over." Hunter nodded, but his mind was racing. They had lost so much already. Bonner's death weighed heavily on him. Monroe's betrayal felt like a wound that would never heal. But in that moment, Hunter knew what he had to do. The world was counting on him, on them. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. "Status report," Hunter barked, turning to his communications officer. "Sir, the Zarkian fleet is approaching the planet's surface. They've launched several waves of heavy assault ships. Our fleet is assembling in the outer orbit, but they're outnumbered. We've already lost several ships in the initial skirmish." Hunter's blood boiled as he stared at the screen. The Zarkians were relentless, but they were underestimating humanity. For centuries, Earth had been ridiculed, mocked, and dismissed as weak. But now, it was humanity's time to prove them all wrong. "All units, prepare for launch," Hunter commanded, his voice now firm. "We are not going down without a fight. Engage the enemy with everything you've got." The communication lines buzzed as the commanders of Earth's remaining forces replied. There was no time to waste. The war had already begun, and the outcome would be decided in the coming hours. As the orders were sent out, Hunter turned back to the main screen. He watched the movements of their fleet, the humans preparing for one final assault. The plan was risky, but it was their best shot. The Zarkians had already made their move, launching massive fleets into the atmosphere. They had planned to bombard Earth's surface with laser strikes, targeting cities and military installations to cripple humanity's resistance. But they hadn't expected what was coming. "Captain, we've detected an anomaly," a technician said, interrupting his thoughts. "A cloaked ship in orbit. It appears to be our own." Hunter's eyes widened. "Our cloaking technology. It's working?" "Yes, sir. It's fully operational," the technician confirmed. Hunter's heart skipped a beat. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Humanity's cloaking technology was their secret weapon. With it, their ships could hide from the Zarkians, appearing invisible until it was too late. It was a risky strategy, but it was the only way to even the odds against the overwhelming Zarkian fleet. "We can use this to our advantage," Hunter said, his voice low but full of conviction. "Prepare the fleet. We'll move into position and strike when they least expect it." The command center buzzed with activity as the final preparations were made. Hunter took a deep breath, focusing on the mission ahead. They had no other choice now. They had to win, or humanity would be lost forever. Meanwhile, high above Earth, the Zarkian fleet loomed in the skies, their ships massive and intimidating. Commander Kalar watched the planet below, a cruel smile crossing his alien face. He believed this would be easy. The humans had always been weak. The Zarkians had wiped out entire civilizations without breaking a sweat. But Earth's resistance had surprised him. He had been briefed about the humans' new cloaking technology, but Kalar was confident that his fleet would be more than a match for them. What he didn't anticipate was the resilience of the human spirit, the fire that burned within their hearts. He had underestimated them. "Sir, we've detected strange energy readings from the planet," one of his officers reported. "It seems like cloaked ships are approaching." Kalar's smile faltered. He had been too arrogant. He had not taken into account the possibility of a counterattack. But now it was too late to back down. The Zarkians had to win. "Engage full firepower," Kalar ordered, his voice cold. "Destroy their ships before they can launch their assault." Hunter's team was in position, the ships cloaked and hidden in the shadows of the Zarkian fleet. They were ready. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense that this moment would decide everything. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for Earth's future, for their families, for everything they had ever known. Hunter's heart raced as the command to attack was given. Launch the assault. The human fleet, cloaked and silent, shot out from their hiding positions, appearing out of nowhere like phantoms in the night. The Zarkian ships were caught off guard. Missiles and energy blasts rained down upon them from every angle, hitting their unprepared vessels with devastating force. The Zarkian fleet scattered, trying to regroup and return fire, but it was too late. The human ships were too fast, too unpredictable. Hunter watched as their ships tore through the Zarkian lines, their weapons cutting through the alien fleet with precision. Each explosion, each blast of energy was a small victory, but it wasn't enough. The Zarkians would retaliate, and they would retaliate hard. As the battle raged on, Hunter knew that this was their moment. This was the final assault. They had to push forward. They had to win. There was no turning back now. "All units, push forward," Hunter shouted. "We finish this today." And as the last of the Zarkian ships fell, Hunter knew they had done it. The invaders had been defeated, their fleet shattered. Earth had won. Humanity had survived. But Hunter's heart was heavy with the weight of the sacrifices they had made. The battle was over, but the price of victory had been steep, and in the silence that followed, as the remains of the Zarkian fleet drifted through space, Hunter could only wonder what the future would hold. The silence that followed the battle felt strange. After the chaos, the explosions, and the constant pressure of the fight, everything was still. The skies above Earth, once filled with the flash of energy blasts and the roar of missile fire, were now eerily quiet. It was as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for the final confirmation that the enemy had truly been defeated. Hunter stood in the command center, his eyes locked on the main screen. The Zarkian fleet had been shattered. Their ships, once proud and powerful, now drifted aimlessly through space, nothing more than wreckage. It was over. The invasion was finished. Earth had won. But as the realization hit him, it wasn't relief that flooded his chest. It was exhaustion. His body ached from the stress of the battle, from the constant tension and the weight of every decision. He had led humanity's last stand, and now it was time to rebuild. But how? Lieutenant Pearson approached him, his expression a mix of weariness and disbelief. "We did it," he said quietly, as if still processing the enormity of what had just happened. Hunter nodded but didn't speak. His mind was far away, replaying the battle in his head. The Zarkians had been a powerful foe, but humanity had outsmarted them at every turn. It had been their will to fight, their drive to survive, that had made the difference. But at what cost? "How many did we lose?" Hunter asked, his voice heavy. Pearson sighed, looking down at the datapad in his hands. "More than we can count. But we did it. The Zarkians are gone." Hunter's gaze drifted to the screen again, his thoughts turning to those who had fallen. Bonner, Monroe, the countless soldiers who had given everything to protect Earth. They had fought for a future that now seemed uncertain, but their sacrifice had not been in vain. They had secured the future of humanity, even if it came at the cost of so many lives. Did we win, or did we just survive? Hunter muttered to himself, unsure if there was even a difference anymore. Pearson didn't answer. He couldn't. There was no easy way to frame what had happened. This was victory, yes, but it was a victory tempered by loss, by the pain of those who wouldn't be coming home. The door to the command center opened, and General Stone walked in, his face grim but proud. "Hunter," he said, his voice steady but carrying a sense of finality. "The war is over. The Zarkians are gone. You did it. Humanity did it." Hunter met his gaze but said nothing. He had no words. What could he say? It wasn't a triumph, not really. It was survival. A survival that came at an unimaginable cost. But even so, they had won. The Earth was safe. For now. "Prepare for Earth's first steps into the future," General Stone continued, as if reading Hunter's thoughts. "The war may be over, but our journey is just beginning. The galaxy will remember us. We've proven ourselves." Hunter's eyes narrowed. The words felt hollow. The galaxy might remember them, but what would they remember? A desperate fight for survival. The humiliation of being underestimated, only to rise up against overwhelming odds. What kind of legacy would humanity leave behind? "I know you're thinking about the future, Hunter," General Stone said, as if sensing the question swirling in his mind. "But right now, we need to focus on rebuilding. We need to ensure that what we fought for isn't lost. Our future depends on the choices we make today." Hunter nodded slowly, but the weight of the general's words pressed on him. Rebuilding wouldn't be easy. The Earth had suffered greatly, and though the Zarkians were gone, the scars of the war would remain. There was so much to repair: cities, infrastructure, lives. So many people had lost everything. And yet, humanity had pulled through. But for how long? "We'll need to rebuild our government, our military, everything," Hunter said, turning to General Stone. "And we'll need to make sure that we don't forget what just happened, that we don't forget the sacrifices of those who came before us." Stone looked at him for a long moment. "I know," he said, his voice low, "but there's one thing we have that they don't: the strength to rebuild, the strength to rise from the ashes and create something better. And we have to do it, not just for us, but for those we've lost." Hunter felt a weight settle over his heart. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about building something new, something that could stand against any threat that came their way. The war was over, but their story wasn't finished. The universe had taken notice of humanity, and it was time to step forward and claim their place among the stars. In the following days, the true scale of Earth's victory began to take shape. The planet began to rebuild, slowly at first, but with the determination of people who had seen the worst and still chosen to rise. The military was reorganized, and a new council was formed to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. The survivors, though broken and weary, began the painful process of healing. But it wasn't just Earth that had changed. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. They had underestimated the strength of Earth's people. And now, humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer in question. The Zarkian fleet had been destroyed, but the lessons learned from the war would shape the future. Hunter stood on the balcony of the newly rebuilt command center, looking out over the horizon. The sun was rising, casting a golden light over the planet. The air was fresh, and the world felt like it was starting anew. The scars of the battle were still there, but they were no longer the only thing that defined Earth. A new beginning was underway. Humanity had survived the impossible, and now they would thrive. They had proven themselves against the galaxy's mightiest foes. They had fought not just for survival, but for the chance to rebuild. And they had won. But as Hunter looked out at the horizon, he knew one thing for certain. The universe was vast, and though Earth had won this battle, the future would bring more challenges. There would be more wars to fight, more enemies to face. But humanity had already proven what they were capable of. They were ready. And as the sun rose higher, casting its warm glow over the Earth, Hunter knew that this was just the beginning. The future was theirs.